Could offensive coordinator Bobby Slowik leave the Texans this offseason to go be a head coach? Welcome into the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans. Offensive coordinator Bobby Slowik, a hot commodity as teams around the league are looking for their next head coach. At least two teams have already requested permission to interview Slowik for their vacant head coach opportunity. And I say at least because Slowik could have more teams after him. The young offensive coordinator came over with DeMeco Ryans from San Francisco, and now, in maybe just one short year, he could be a head coach in the National Football League. Let's take a look at those two teams. Would Slowik / should Slowik leave for those opportunities? And some good advice from DeMeco Ryans for his offensive coordinator. So Slowik's candidacy is backed by the fact that this offense, led by C.J. Stroud, was pretty darn good for most of the year. They finished 12th in overall yards. They finished 14th in scoring per game. And C.J. Stroud just put together one of the best rookie seasons ever by a quarterback. And he's never been short on compliments for Bobby Slowik. He's talked at length about how Slowik makes the offense easy to learn. He really enjoys working with Bobby Slowik. I mean, the budding superstar has over and over again complimented Bobby Slowik, which goes a long way when you got to think that the opportunities that Slowik will have will primarily be about fixing a quarterback spot or getting a quarterback and developing that quarterback. Well, Slowik did a great job in developing C.J. Stroud this year and did a great job calling the offense for an offense that was led by a rookie quarterback. Initially, their starting running back was a bit disappointing, an unknown group of wide receivers that turned out to be pretty darn good, and a shuffling offensive line all across this season. And Slowik did a pretty nice job. I know a lot of us have some criticisms of Slowik in some various moments. Sometimes he's been too aggressive. I haven't loved a lot of his key third down, and certainly when they go for it on fourth down calls, but he's done a nice job this season. That's what his candidacy is built on. Now, the first two teams to request to interview Bobby Slowik are the Carolina Panthers and the Washington Commanders. The Panthers got a up-close look at Bobby Slowik this season when the Texans traveled to Carolina to take on the Panthers, and that was one of the worst offensive performances of the season for the Texans. I think C.J. Stroud had 140 yards. The Texans only scored a handful of points, and they lost. And many of us came out of that game feeling like the offense let the defense down and could have done a little bit more and snuck out of Carolina with a win. The Panthers got an up-close look at him. They've got Bryce Young. They need a young, ingenious, potentially offensive mind to fix their quarterback spot. And the organization with the ownership and David Tepper, that's a little rough. But that's the first team that requested Bobby Slowik to interview for their head coach job. The second team, the Washington Commanders, that's where Bobby Slowik got his start. He got his start in Washington. His first job in the NFL was a defensive assistant for, at the time, the Redskins, now the Commanders. And his dad was a coach there for a couple of years as well. So it makes sense that they are taking a shot at an offensive coordinator. They got the number 2 overall pick in the draft. They may be getting a young quarterback. And hey, again, Bobby Slowik's candidacy is here because he developed a young quarterback. And oh, what pick was C.J. Stroud? Oh, that's right, the number 2 overall pick. Maybe the Commanders looking to strike gold a second time, this time with Slowik in charge of everything, not just the offense. Before we get into should or would Bobby Slowik take either of those jobs, I really liked what DeMeco Ryans had to say this week when he was asked about Bobby Slowik potentially getting one of these jobs. And did he have any advice for Bobby Slowik as he listened to these teams talk to him about potentially taking over as their head coach?
Yeah, my advice to Bobby is just be selective. Right, you only get one opportunity to do it. You want to make sure you're selective and you're going to, if you get the opportunity, go to a place that you feel like you can be effective.
Now, DeMeco Ryans was not choked up when he was asked about Bobby Slowik. He's dealing with a little bit of his voice escaping him this week, maybe a little under the weather. So he wasn't choked up with Bobby Slowik. He was just a little raspy there. But I like the advice. Be selective. Be selective in your opportunities. A lot of guys, like DeMeco Ryans said, they only get one crack at it. And if you don't succeed in that first crack, sometimes it's a long, long road back to that second opportunity. Let's take a look at those two teams that requested and should Bobby Slowik make the move to be their head coach if he gets that opportunity. The first is the Carolina Panthers, and this one is a definite no for me, for Bobby Slowik. Yes, Bryce Young is there, and Slowik's obviously done a lot of homework on Bryce Young. The Texans had Bryce Young in for interviews, talked with him. The Texans would have taken Bryce Young if he was there at number 2. So there's clearly a lot of homework that has been done on Bryce Young, the prospect. But then you look at what Bryce Young did this season for the Panthers. It wasn't very good football. In fact, a lot of it was bad football. Some of it was the team, the offensive line shaky, and there's no weapons to speak of on that team. But my goodness, some of it was Bryce Young just not playing very well, not playing to that level that a lot of us watched him play at Alabama. You know, CJ Stroud was able to make Sunday look like Saturday. Bryce Young was not able to make Sundays look like Saturdays very often, if at all, over the course of this season. And I mentioned a moment ago, ownership. David Tepper and the stories coming out about him, ownership in Carolina, man, that does not seem like a great spot to work. That doesn't seem like a great situation to be in. And the Panthers were the worst team in football. They don't have their top pick, which would have been the number 1 overall pick, to help improve that team this offseason because they spent so much trying to get Bryce Young last year. That's a spot that Bobby Slowik should stay away from. Take the interview, get the experience, but my goodness, stay away from Carolina if you're Bobby Slowik. I'd go 2 thumbs down on would and should Bobby Slowik take that job. 2 thumbs down on that one for me. The Washington Commanders, it's a bit different. And they had a couple of moments where they looked successful on offense. There's a piece here or there on that offense that's pretty nice. Terry McLaurin's probably one of the most underrated wide receivers in all of football. I like Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson there in the backfield. They got some other pieces that they've invested in and tried to make happen over the course of the year. Nothing amazing over on offense. Nothing incredible once in a lifetime from that offense. They've spent a lot of money on that defense in Washington, specifically at the defensive tackle spot. They traded away a couple of their ends this past season. So you got to rebuild that defense just a tiny bit, despite it already being an expensive investment on that defensive line. And you have to use the number 2 overall pick on a quarterback more than likely. So if Bobby Slowik wanted to start over, mold a quarterback exactly how he wanted to do it, which I would think that he's done it pretty well with CJ Stroud already. He's the top offensive mind in the building for the Houston Texans. Yes, D'Amico Ryans has some input on that, but I can't imagine that it's that attractive to start from scratch because, as we know, in the NFL, known quantities are far better than the unknown quantities. And when you know CJ Stroud is one of the best young quarterbacks, heck, maybe one of the best quarterbacks in football, I wouldn't be too hasty to run away from that just because the next hot shot prospect could be yours. And oh, by the way, you're getting the second quarterback because the first pick goes to the Bears. Maybe they select a quarterback or they trade it to somebody that does want a quarterback. But you're getting the second quarterback off the board. That worked out for Bobby Slowik and the Texans this past year. But if you're taking that gig, you'd probably want the opportunity to select whoever you want. You don't have that chance with the Commanders. Ownership, we don't know a ton about them. They've got a lot of money. They're going to try to clean up the image of the Commanders that Dan Snyder ruined over the past couple of years. It's not the greatest spot in the world. There's better opportunities. I'm going to go double thumbs down on taking the Commanders job for Bobby Slowik as well. Would he? Should he? We'll go double thumbs down on that one as well. I believe the most likely scenario is something that D'Amico Ryans himself went through. D'Amico Ryans, first year after he called plays in San Francisco, he got a couple of interest and opportunity moments in the offseason. One was the Minnesota Vikings interviewed him. There were rumors about the Raiders wanting to talk to him as well. D'Amico Ryans ultimately turned down a second interview with the Minnesota Vikings and stuck with the 49ers for one more year. What was the situation for him at the end of the year? He was the hottest commodity on the market. Every team that had an opening wanted to talk to D'Amico Ryans this past offseason. Now, of course, he's the Texans head coach. Bobby Slowik has to have looked at what D'Amico Ryans did and think, I could do something similar. Because Slowik's not the hottest commodity on the market right now. That's probably the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, Ben Johnson. Let me see here. What did Ben Johnson do last year? Took some interviews, looked around, stuck around for one more year, and now he is the candidate out there in the coaching carousel. So Bobby Slowik is a candidate this year. If he stuck around a year for the Texans, he could be the candidate. Not to mention the fact that if you just ran it back with what the Texans have, it should be a solid offense, but they've got a lot of money to invest. They can invest draft picks. You got to imagine some of these players on offense are going to get better. So Bobby Slowik could find himself as the candidate next offseason, and I believe he'll follow in DeMeco Ryans' footsteps and take some interviews, get the experience, ultimately say thanks, no thanks. Maybe he won't even get close to getting the jobs, but thanks, no thanks for Bobby Slowik. He's back with the Texans for one more year, and then on the back of a really strong offensive year, Slowik is the candidate for everybody in the next coaching cycle. I believe that is the outcome. Don't take the Panthers job. Don't take the Commies job. Come back to Houston for one more year. Ramp it up even more, and then Bobby Slowik ends up as the top candidate in the coaching carousel a year from now. And if he's the top candidate in the coaching carousel a year from now, that means that Houston Texans blew it out of the water when it comes to offense, and that would be fantastic to watch next year. It's going to be fantastic to watch the Browns on Saturday afternoon at NRG Stadium as the Browns and Texans kick off Super Wild Card Weekend. It's going to be a fun one. Plenty more about that game and that matchup coming your way here on the YouTube channel. So throw me a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check the description to enter the hat raffle. Get you a Houston football hat. You can also purchase the hat. It's in the description down below as well. What's Houston football, Cody? That's where I do all my writing about the Houston Texans. You don't want to miss out on that. Hope you enjoyed the video. Appreciate you watching, and I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.